why I have quite a bit of trouble with the whole actually a couple of things in here, even to write them down,
into a group, and then where like creepers come in and you're like blocking them with their teeth, everything explodes, then you said I'm not the right describe it, and then you have
oh my gosh. First of all, from some backstory, suddenly Eric was yeah, so you also have Romans in this.
Are they DLCs or are they just
like there's a secondary canon that goes halfway across the country. It's just a decrease in the context of each one of these so that's the Liganti and Gaia are actually ghosts.
Yes, that's why.
The person with the right confidence. I'm not jealous at all, not at all.
Well, because I feel like if I try to,
What is it?
oh, the mini store, oh, actually not allowed to print it. So I can print something else.
It's fine.
Alright.
Oh, you almost done speeding? If not, we'll take a picture, it's okay, I just wanna make sure I don't mess it up. It's nice to just sit back and watch them take it, isn't it? I feel sorry for kids.
Well, I'm not taking it.
Oh yes. I definitely don't miss taking tests.
No. Auditing courses sounds good to me.
Yeah. Oh, yesterday,
Yes.
last Tuesday afternoon, we had a group of us. The new president of our seminary out in Pittsburgh, they're having a discussion group on a philosopher from Canada named Charles Taylor. He's only written 3 books, but each of them's like, that thick. And his latest one's called A Secular Age, and he's one of those. He's a philosopher / sociologist who really takes history in its broad sweep. So it's a book that covers from the Middle Ages to now, basically kind of how we got to now kind of book. And there were 11 of us from around the country in on the discussion. This is the first time I've joined in, and boy, it's a dense book. I already spent 16 weeks on it in my doctoral course, and now doing it again. So it's making it a very interesting. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm glad I just wrote papers for this and didn't have to take a test.
Tests are the worst. I don't mind writing essays and stuff like that, but I don't like tests.
There you go. And as he's finishing up his test, I think we'll begin with the word of prayer so that we're ready to start when you're done. Okay? Are you done?
I have to finish.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt you. You sure? Okay. Let's pray this morning as we begin. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to come before your word. We thank you for taking a deep breath after a test or arriving safely after a day of work and a break in our schedule. Ask that you bless us as we come to this word. Bring us to a fuller understanding, if not a complete one. Help us lift our eyes to you and trust you ever more fully through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Go ahead, you can finish it. Are you finishing it later? Or you want to finish it now?
If you guys are tired, I will, but.
You sure? Okay. You can finish if you want. We can chat about other things as we're getting ready. In fact, when we do this a little bit. Important. So we can do a little review of what we've encountered in the first 6 days of creation up till now. So we're in day 6. So what are some of the highlights? What are some of the things you remember going back through the last 2 weeks? Just highlights. Some of the things that jumped out at you. Maybe notes you took to yourself. I, by the way, do recommend that. I recommend scrolling in the corners of your Bible because that way you don't lose your notes and you can come back to it years later and you'll see what you wrote in there. I tend to misplace notebooks and sticky notes and stuff like that really quickly, but writing in your Bible you'll always have them.
One of the things that caught my attention, and I read it several times and never caught it, it says, God said, let us make mankind in our image, meaning that everybody was there at the very beginning. I know that, but I never read it in Genesis.
Okay, so you notice the plural names.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, there's a sort of plurality in God. Yeah.
Likely the Trinity.
Right.
That is certainly how Christians have always read that. We see the Trinity prefigured in this language. There is some discussion amongst scholars that plural language in the Jewish, in a Hebrew idiom, could mean an emphasis, like he's really, really God, because he's sort of like the royal we. Have you heard that phrase before? Like the Queen says, "We are not amused." You know? So there's some talk that could be the case, but it certainly doesn't seem to be that was ever emphasized amongst the rabbis. So yeah, that plurality in references to God. What else grabbed your attention?
Well, all of them, the previous days, it's just God said, just for.
Okay.
But when we get to day 6, it's let us make, it seems like there's more, I don't know, more, I don't mean to say more thought in what is going on, but day 6 definitely stands out from the other days, or what is being created in my mind stands out from the other days.
Yeah, there's a change in the formula, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's a distinction at least
Yeah.
of day 6. Day 6 is and he says, "Let us make."
I never thought about that. That is interesting.
That's excellent. That's really good close reading. What else? What else jumped out?
Well, the other ones seem in the first days like there's a number of different animals, like the beasts, or the fish, like there could be a whole bunch of different beasts or a whole bunch of different fish. But when it's man, it's one thing. To me, it comes out as man is just one thing.
Right. In the other creations, we have the other days of creation. We have the creation of kinds. Right.
And also to expand on what she was saying, he created one bird. Said he created the birds.
Exactly. That's exactly. There's types of things, right? You get the creation of the seed bearing, or the fruit bearing, or the creation of the flying things, or the
But with men, it was just Adam.
Yeah, there's something unique
Yeah.
in humanity.
Because it is God. It's
Yeah.
in His image.
Absolutely. So versus humanity, which is singular. We get male and female, but we don't. Right.
True, there's only one human species. There are variations in appearance, but there's only one human species.
Right. And in the rabbinical tradition, in the Jewish tradition, which Christians pick up and elaborate on, there's a distinction between creatures. We talked about this, the nefesh, right? The living creatures. We talked about that last time. So in living creatures, there's a distinction of those that have, obviously they all have flesh, right? And you have flesh and soul, flesh, soul, and spirit. This becomes this. So you have the creatures that don't seem to have souls are things like insects. They don't seem to have anything remotely resembling what we as human beings would recognize in ourselves. But then you have things like dogs, or
Cats to a certain
cats,
extent.
or cats are a little more impersonal, but yeah, cats, dogs, any kind of animal that seems to have some emotions and will that are beyond simple survival. Flesh, soul, and spirit is humanity alone. And we'll get to that in chapter 2, why they'll make that distinction in the rabbinical tradition.
Well, going back to the creation of kinds, Pastor Brett, too,
Uh-huh.
all the creatures were created from the dust, the ground, right? Am I right?
Well, it just says he spoke. It doesn't say that they were created from the
Okay,
dust.
so
You
I
just
guess
see
we're
that.
reading down here, and then, from Eve, though, came Adam's, or the rib. So,
But that's not till chapter 2.
I know, I'm reading it.
That's all right. We're going to get to it, but we don't want to get to it too quickly because it's gonna help us flesh in some
Okay,
things.
so when we were talking about the creation of kinds, I was struck, in my head with literally how they were created too.
Yeah, they do seem to be created again in the ancient tradition of that they were created out of pre-existing stuff, but it's not. That stuff is not mentioned by name. It's not like dust is used or something like that. We get that. We get that in the second in chapter 2 about Adam and Eve.
Which I marked, okay.
Yeah, and we're reading it, and that's okay. The stories do go together, but we slow down our reading enough to pay attention to the way the two different stories are told here, or at least repeated differently, and there's different levels of elaboration. What else?
Just something on what you were doing with the living creatures before. I don't know whether you said this, whether you brought it up or not, but where is the differentiation between soul and spirit?
We'll get to chapter 2. We're not there yet. That distinction is one that the rabbis make in the Talmudic tradition, where there's a long tradition, long before Christians come on the scene, of the teachers debating and discussing all this stuff. And they did it both as scholars and as lawyers. And this is why you see the lawyers, the scribes, the Pharisees. These were all people who worked in the temple. They literally debated things back and forth like lawyers debate them now. That's why you're hearing all this stuff in the news right now about a new Supreme Court nominee, because it's case-based law. So the decisions that the court makes affect lots of people down the road. It worked the same way in the rabbinical tradition. They would debate this stuff. So we'll eventually, when we get to the story of Noah, I'm going to point you all onto a video that you can watch on your own time, but you're going to see them looking at several different rabbis and what they said about these stories. And those become different schools of thinking about them. So, anything else grab you as we were up till this point, days 1 through 5, especially?
In the first, it says how he created the world, meaning Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe it could just be the way that I interpreted it, but that he had created everything else, like the other planets and the rest of everything, but Earth until that moment.
That could very well be. Yeah, that approach to things was just God created the heavens and the earth, boom, and then you move into that verse 2 where you start to get that, and then the earth was without form and void and all this kind of stuff, and that language is in there. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it does seem to be that from verse 2 on we're situated on the earth. Yeah, absolutely.
When it refers to the fact that he created the heavens and the earth,
Mm-hmm.
does it, when he refers to heavens, does it refer to heaven as in the heaven where God is, or in heavens as in the sky? Because those are the two different ways to see it.
There's different ways to distinguish that. It does go on to talk about the heaven of the heavens, but it seems that the heavens being spoken about here are like literally the sky above us, rather than like God's place where he lives. But the same word is used. Anything else? Okay. Well, we're going to jump back into the creation story here at verse 26. So Genesis 1:26, and we're going to focus here on the creation of humanity. And here, this is the first time we get a distinction in the days, and I think it was great we picked this up. And God saw that it was good. Isn't that the phrase with which we end the creation on the other 5 days, right? God saw that it was good. Now, he says that in the middle of day 6. And then God said, because we haven't moved on. We're not on to day 7 yet. Then God said. So this seems to be, again, day 6 is different in character than the other days. both in the formula used to initiate it, right, and in the formula used to conclude it. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So there we have that refrain we've had on the other days, right? But it's separated from the "it was good" by this interlude where God creates humanity. These few verses I just read to you, in particular, the first 5 of them, have been the source of innumerable books have been written about just these verses. So we're just going to scratch the surface today, okay? But we're going to hit some of the high points. So going back to verse 26. I really should say the first 3 verses. But verse 26. What jumps out at you as we move into this section?
Well, that man would be above, if I can use that word, the other creatures.
Why would you say that?
Well, let them have dominion over the fish.
Dominion, okay. So that's something that has not been accorded to any of the creation yet. Nothing like dominion. We talked a little bit about that. The word dominion in English is from the word domini in Latin, which all of our good scholars remember what that means. Domini.
After the year of Christ or something.
Yep. Means
In the year of the Lord.
means Lord. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I think the first part,
Yeah.
the A.
Yeah, Anno Domini means year of our Lord. That's right. AD, Anno Domini. So, dominion means to have lordship over things. Okay? So yeah, that certainly jumps out at us. That makes Adam and Eve, the male and the female. Actually, they don't have names yet, right? Do any of your translations have a name in there?
I just have male and female.
Yeah, male and female.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Wait, which line is this?
Verse 26. Let us make man in our image.
If you're looking for the line with male and female, it's verse 27.
Mm-hmm. So none of you have a name there?
No, I should know.
Okay. Do any of you have a footnote that says something down at the bottom of your page on your Bible?
Wait, I think I might have one.
Something
Yeah,
about
the
24
footnote.
hours.
What does it say?
Let me.
What word is actually being translated as man there? I mean from Hebrew. What word there? What word is being translated? You might have that in a footnote.
Hang on, this thing is a lot of footnotes, so I'm just
So in verse, we're just going to be in 126 for a while here. So the word translated as man in verse 26 is. Does anyone have that in their footnotes?
Humans.
You're getting closer, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But in Hebrew, what would the word actually be? Does anyone have that marked in your
It
footnote?
says probable reading of the original
You're close.
Hebrew text.
Yeah. She's on the right track. Like
Masoretic,
Masoretic text.
the earth.
Wait, say that again. That's okay.
That's literally what it says.
Yeah, can you read it again, the whole thing?
Probable reading of the original Hebrew text. See Syriac.
Oh, okay. That's doing some complex language stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Syriac is another ancient language that gets tied into the Old Testament a bit. But the actual word here is Adam.
What is it? Explain that again. What is that?
The word translated as man in verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image." It actually in the Hebrew says, "Let us make Adam in our image."
I have the Hebrew Adam is the generic term for humankind.
Excellent. First important thing. Yes.
It's not. I don't have my Bible with me.
That's
I don't
okay.
even know if I saw it in my Bible.
Uh-huh.
But I was like researching their names, and I don't even know if like did he name them because like the word Adam also means like of the earth, like it means dirt.
Yes, you guys are on top of it. That's awesome. Okay. So, yeah, we'll break down Adam a little bit, okay? I wish I knew Hebrew better so I could put it up here in the fancy Hebrew script, but I'll mess it up, so I'm too much respect to do that. It can be translated as man. Probably better translated as not him. Human or humankind. But it's directly related to what word? You just said it. Dirt. Yeah, earth. Just like the word human is related to the word humus. Yep.
That's
like earth.
It's like when you grind chickpeas up and you
That's hummus.
That's hummus, but yes, it's yeah. But humus is like the earth that you plant in the spring if you plant a garden. Okay, so that's the Latin connection of the same connection that you see in Hebrew between the word Adam and earth. So here in this verse, he created, even though now it's not going to be till chapter 2, and where we get into God takes the dust of the earth and forms the man out of it. But already, we have this connection. Humankind is equivalent to earth. Okay, even though we don't have that part of the story recounted for us in chapter 1. Yeah. And Adam is a generic, you're right, for humankind. It means earth, but it's also generic for humankind. So, maybe that helps explain verse 27 a little bit better, right? God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So does it make sense there? Why then, if you put the word Adam in every time you see the word man in verse 27. So God created, and you could even say the Adam in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And there you get the plural. Okay? So you get this kind of refrain and this distinction referred to singular first, and then by extension into the plural of human, male and female. Yeah.
And then Eve is like the same thing. It just means giver of life or mother of all creatures.
Mother of all creatures. And Eve doesn't get her name for a long time. She won't have a name till chapter 3, and towards the end of chapter 3 at that. But the question here is Adam the name, or does it just refer to his title? We call him Adam, but there's no naming of him here. He's going to be instructed to name the animals in a little bit, but he's not given a name. This is simply what species he is. He's the Adam. He's the earth thing, but made in God's image. Now this is what really gets interesting.
Wait, before we get into that.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
Genesis is one of the most excuse me. But it says here that they may rule over all fish, livestock, and everything. Mm-hmm. Yet the Jewish people don't believe that the women have any rights and powers or whatever. How does that?
We will get to that in chapter 2, or chapter 3, excuse me, chapter 3. You're thinking a little ahead, but yeah, that dominion piece, clearly at the beginning, let's dig a little deeper here, guys. What do we have here? Words of the heavens, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So, who's the real king of this whole scenario? God, right. God. Now, what's he doing? Giving dominion to his new creation, the Adam.
It's almost like he's like passing it down.
Yes, passing it down. What do we call someone who the king passes off authority to?
The air.
An heir. Can be if they're going to actually become king someday. But what if they're not? What if they're never going to take the place? God's never going to get replaced. So what do we call the person directly under that? Different traditions call it different things, but in English we tend to have a word for it. Any of you see The Lord of the Rings?
The bear.
No, not the bear. There was this guy in Gondor. Steward.
Oh,
I can't believe I remembered that.
Yep. Adam's being created to be a steward. In the king's absence, or by the king's decree, he's going to rule in the king's place. The steward takes care of the kingdom when the king's out of town. Now, God's never really out of town. But the steward has appointed authority. The steward is going to be the literal right-hand man of the king. That's the steward's job. The king doesn't come down off the throne and bark orders at everybody. He says to the steward, hey, get this done. Then the steward's job is to make sure it happens in the kingdom. Okay? So this dominion piece, God is extending his authority down to this creature made in his image. Now there's the first bit of clue we have about the significance of being made in God's image. It has something to do with authority, this extended authority. In fact, God mentions the authority before he mentions being made in his image, right? Let us make, oh no, sorry, it isn't. He does make man in our image. So it first talks about the image, he talks about having dominion. So those two are connected intimately in that first sentence. Yes?
I just think that is interesting. At least in my translation, it says, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness.
And our likeness. Okay. Where does it say in our likeness? Is it in verse 26?
It's in verse 26.
Yep,
It says,
yep.
"Let us make
In our
mankind
image after our likeness. Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk. Well, those are fun, different words.
Also, that line, that's the first time it said, let us make man. But all the other passages, I'm sorry, I can only see far with.
No, that's fine. I understand. I'm doing the same thing.
I'm having such a hard time with the passages today.
I'm doing the same thing.
So in all other passages, it was, and God said, but this is the first time God said, let us make.
Right. And I think that's what you were picking up, Anne, was that the formula changes, right? In a sense, it's always been God said, God said, God said. So the story's told in the third person. Mm-hmm. Now we move into God's speaking on his own behalf.
Okay.
And God says, let us make.
Okay.
Okay, so we're getting that formula. We're not actually told the words that God spoke on the other things. He just said, let us create, right? God spoke and it happened, but now we're being given this formula, these words of God said, let us. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
It does have God speaking in each verse,
Mm-hmm.
at the very least.
Uh-huh.
On each day it says that, and God said such and such a thing. So he does speak, but I guess that, I don't know, it just is interesting because you said that he doesn't speak before that point, but he speaks for himself in all the other verses.
You're right. He does. I misspoke there. You're right. He does. But the formula is different here.
Mm-hmm.
The formula is different here. Yes. So there is a change up. So let's talk about those two words. We've got two words you zeroed in on: likeness and image. Right. What's our difference here?
You mean the difference between likeness and image?
Yeah.
Quality versus what you appear to be?
Could be.
Quality versus appearance?
Could be.
I'm so literal, can't you tell?
No, but we're also bumping up against the limitations of our language to translate the concepts that are there in the original Hebrew, and that's true of anytime you change languages, right? Anytime you change languages, there are words that have different freight in the original language than you do in the new language. Yeah.
So like likeness is like being similar, but image is like how you want something to be. Like if I draw something, that's how I want it to look.
Okay. Absolutely. Similarity, I think, is absolutely there with the likeness piece, right? So he's in his like. So what like if God's gonna say in his likeness, what have we learned about God so far in the story? Let's pretend the rest of the Bible doesn't exist yet. What have we learned so far in the first 25 verses of Genesis? What have we learned about God?
He doesn't have a body, he has a
Spirit.
era.
Has it said that?
I'm sorry?
Has it said that in the first 25 verses? Does it say God doesn't have a body?
Okay, no.
We certainly get that later in the Bible. I want to try and isolate what we've learned in the first 25 verses so far. He creates. We know that about God, right?
When it's
Creates. Yep. Go ahead.
when you refer to the fact that it says he doesn't have a body, is it because of the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters? Is that what you were referring to?
Similar to yes.
Okay. So we know that God has spirit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And power.
Has spirit, has power.
He likes what he creates, or he's happy, you know.
His emotions.
Not only likes it, but remember we talked about last week? He creates it good. It actually has a quality called good.
Good, yeah.
He recognizes it,
Right.
right? So he creates, and what he creates is good. What else? And this is a distinction that kind of probably ties in with the goodness piece. What does he bring? What does he bring into existence? At the beginning, there's just, for those of you doing the New Mahalish, capital C,
Chaos.
chaos. So he brings order out of chaos, right? Okay. Anything else we learn about God? Just in the first 25 verses. Anything else we can pick up?
Is very powerful.
Yep, we got power.
Oh, so this is just what it's interpreted, not literal, but orderly. Orderly.
Absolutely, yeah, he's bringing
Oh,
order.
my God.
Absolutely,
That's good.
absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
guys,
This is a good.
glasses are throwing me
That's
off.
all right. This is a good start for us. So here's what we know about God just so far in the story. Now we're going to learn a whole lot more about God as the story goes on in the next 65 books. But we've got these things at least so far in the story. So whatever it means to be like God, in some way, the new Adam has these things. He can be creative. He has spirit. He has power. What he's supposed to create is good. And he's to bring order.
You can definitely see that in my mother. She goes crazy when the house is messy. That's
And
what
she's not here to rebuke you. So isn't this part of what a steward does over a kingdom? Create order. Create the conditions for the kingdom to prosper. Right? That's what a steward's job is to do. If a steward does their job badly, everyone suffers in the kingdom. And the kingdom so far is God, the male and the female, the Adams, and all the other stuff. All the Nephilim, all the Nefesh. All the living creatures are what we have here as the kingdom so far. So far.
So you say harmony.
Yes.
Kind of harmony is what you say.
Yeah. And the early church took that language of steward and added another word to it, based on their own experience. Whose job was it? Can I erase this? You guys have what you want out of it? Okay. So whose job is it in the experience of the Old Testament people? Whose job is it to keep harmony between God and creation? Yes.
The priest.
The priest. Adam and Eve are created to be priests over creation. There's two ways to define a priest. Huh? Or did they goof? Yes. We're getting to that. Yeah. They are created as priests, a priest of creation. Stewards and priests. The steward's always accountable to the king. Priest's job, by the time that the Old Testament rabbis get around to this, you have a priest, because what happens in chapter 3. A priest's job is twofold. First of all, a priest is defined as one who makes sacrifices. The sacrifices are for the purpose of keeping communication open with the deity. So it's the priest's job to present the people's case to God, and to turn around then and present God's case to the people. What does your pastor do today? Does he preach?
Yes.
That's him presenting God's case to the people. Does he lead the congregation in prayer?
Mm-hmm.
That's him presenting the people's case to God. He's an intermediary. He goes back and forth. A priest of creation now goes back and forth between the creation, which God has created good and pronounced good. The priest's job is authority. To take care of creation on God's behalf, to keep taking the needs of the creation back to God.
So they kind of work as a middleman or as a translator?
As a middleman or a translator, exactly. That's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Does Adam know this?
Well, so far he's not talking, so I don't know. But I think he will get it pretty quickly, because when we get to chapter 2, what's going to be the first job that God gives to Adam? To the creation. So what's interesting is Adam gets named, titled. So far what we have are all the living beasts and the livestock. We get kinds. What we don't get are orange trees and maple trees as fruit and seed bearing. Okay? We don't get that. Adam's job is going to be to do all that. The only one who gets named as a particular species is man. Humanity, Adam. The Adam. Okay. Back into the text here. So that's likeness. This is the way in which we have likeness. Elizabeth, would you do me a favor? Will you run to my office right as you walk in the door on the right-hand side? There's or on my little corkboard in the corner, there's a picture of Jesus, an icon of Jesus. Would you bring it in?
Which one?
The one, it's on the corkboard in the corner above my altar. I should have brought it with me. So that's so far, that's likeness. Now let's talk about what it means to be made in God's image. Because why use both words, unless they both have a meaning? So, you started to talk about image before. You talked about it as, when you're drawing.
What you picture something to be, what you want it to look
What you want it to be, okay. What you pictured it to be. Uh-huh. I think that certainly applies. If we're made in God's image, who did God make us to be? Like himself, right? In a way, right? That's the likeness piece. So he made it just the way he wanted them. Now, in his own image, he created them, male and female, he created them. And together they both have that divine sanction as priests of creation. What else?
Created with unique abilities absent from every other creature on earth that mirror the divine nature of God.
Okay, so humanity uniquely mirrors God in a way, right? Excellent. Anything else about you guys for image? Okay. Here's something you can't get from the text, and this comes down to that distance between our cultures and our languages. In ancient Near East thought, an image did more. An image did. Should make that number like this. An image did more than represent. We live in the day and age of the photograph. How many of you know the Harry Potter stories? What's unique about pictures in Harry Potter's world compared to our world?
They move and talk.
They move and talk, right? This is much more the way the ancient world thought of images. One of the reasons why there's a prescription against creating a graven image in the Ten Commandments is because the image does more than represent the thing. It actually makes the thing present in a way. Okay? It does more than represent something. It makes it present. Now we've lost that sense in our modern world. because pictures are quick and easy. I don't expect that every picture on my cell phone means that the person there is present to me. Okay? But in ancient Near East thought, that was the way they thought. They thought that the image actually made it present in a certain way.
Maybe because like images could have like taken much more work. So for instance, like a painting could take like even years to make, but now it's like not worth as much because you really just go.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's thought and effort and soul put into the work.
Yeah, precisely. So here I have for you, the word translated as image in the Greek Old Testament is the word icon. And especially, I've shown some icons to my Bible study before, but we've got 2 Roman Catholics here. You're more likely to see these around your church than we are. Some Lutheran churches have them, but not as many. You're probably never going to see one at your church as a Baptist church. Okay? But this is the kind of image that this language is referring to. If you have any friends who are Orthodox or Eastern Rite Catholic, what's the first thing they do when they go into church? Nope. Nope. There's a little stand, looks like a music stand, right in the middle of the church. If they're really old-fashioned, you go to that stand first before you go to the left side if you're a man and the right side if you're a woman.
Don't you kiss the icon?
Yes. That's the first thing you do is
I
kiss
just
the
feel that
icon.
because you told me that at one point.
You kiss the icon. This makes the hair on the back of the neck of Protestants stand way, way up. Because it seems like a graven image. It seems like you're worshiping a graven image. That's not what they believe they're doing. This picture, if it's a true icon, if it's a blessed icon, actually makes Christ present in a unique way in that sanctuary. They kiss the icon not because they're kissing a picture, but because they're kissing Jesus. And that's what they would do if he was bodily present.
It also makes germaphobe's hair stand on it.
It does that too. But when we went to see a display at the National Gallery a couple of years ago of Eastern Orthodox art, they had to put glass over all the icons because they're ancient, they're deteriorating, but everybody wanted to kiss them. If you go there and you're religious, you kiss the icons. So they put glass over everything. There's all these lip marks all over the glass.
That doesn't sound very sanitary.
It's not sanitary at all.
Especially in this time.
But kissing the feet of Jesus wouldn't be very sanitary either, but people did it.
Especially not that day and age when there's like
No one's wearing shoes?
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it made the thing represented present. In fact, one of the best books on icons to help me understand the idea of an icon is called Windows to Heaven. So it's like a window through which the person represented is looking at you and you're looking at them. That's actually why they're not allowed to look realistic. You can't make them look like a photograph. There's very, very specific rules because you're not to worship this. Because it's a graven image and you're not to do it. You're supposed to look through it at the thing that is represented. That's who you're worshiping. Or who you're honoring. If it's a saint, you don't worship saints, you honor saints. But they're still present to you in a more real way that way. That's the way the word image is being used here. So Adam actually makes God present to his creation in a unique way. Because he's made in God's image. Okay? That's just ancient, that's the way that part of the world thought about pictures. So we won't get that as modern people unless we have that background in our study notes or in a book you've learned something about the Old Testament. So to be made in God's image, the likeness piece we can get pretty easily. How are we like God? And that's, read the stuff you found on your webpage. Dave did a little research preparing us here.
Well, there are 2 things. First one says that examples of in God's image is we are given intellectual ability far superior to that of any animal. We are given a mind capable of hearing and understanding God. We are given emotions capable of responding to God with love and devotion. We are given a free will, which enables us to choose whether or not to obey God. And then the summary of the whole thing is, human beings are created with unique abilities absent from every other creature on the earth that mirror the divine nature of God.
Okay, and you get it. That's a particular person's reflection. His pastor would strongly disagree that we have free will in relationship to God, because I know his pastor. So there's a lot of there's a lot of ways that we're like God. You could probably add to that list. We talked about creativity. I don't think creativity was on that list, but that was one of the things we came up with from those first 25 verses. And certainly, human beings create in a way no other animal does, right? That seems to be something unique. We have the opportunity to do bad as well, yeah. But like a beaver can make a dam, but they're programmed genetically to do that. They're not going to make a dam different than everyone else. So that you have, all the beavers make the same kinds of dams. It's not like one person creates the Sistine Chapel architecture and another person creates the Capitol building or something like that. There's all these different ways we can be creative. And so that makes us a little bit different than those other creatures in that way.
Also, we can sense beauty in things.
There's one. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the classic path back to God is the true, the beautiful, and the good. And
along the lines of Elizabeth, we can sense good in others and good in things,
Yeah. And so far, there's no distinction because God's created everything good. The distinction between good and evil starts to come up as we get into chapter 3. Yeah.
That could kind of be different because animals, some sorts like butterflies and little animals might sense that someone is good or pure and trust them.
Okay. They have an intuition about that. Maybe that's that kind of, do they have a soul or something like that, that distinction we were talking about before, yeah.
But that's probably more like they're programmed to be trusting towards the one that will not hurt them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kindness kind of thing, right? Or the same reason we certainly have some of that in our brains as well. Why do we like things with big creatures, chibi things, right? Why do we like them? Because they look like babies. Babies have big eyes for their head, size of their head. Your eyes are the same size now as when you were born, but your head's gotten bigger. That's why babies look the way they do. They have these nice big eyes, and we're programmed to go, oh, they're so cute.
So cute.
Absolutely. All right, so that's excellent. We've got these creatures created now. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. So let's dig into that. Verse 27. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them.
What's interesting that you seem to have it as him, them. Mine just has it described as them.
All right. So yours is NIV, I'm guessing? Is yours NIV?
Yeah, I think so.
Your International Version? Anybody have a Revised Standard Version? What does yours say?
Mine is his own image, him, and then them is the final.
Okay. Anybody have a King James or something like that? Okay.
No.
Or Good News? Is that what do you have over there? You have an NASB. Okay.
It almost seems like you're repeating the same thing, kind of you're kind of repeating yourself.
And how many of you have it set apart so it looks like a piece of poetry, like from the rest of the text?
Yeah.
Revised Standard doesn't do that. Yours does. Yeah, that's the general consensus of scholarship here, is that the repetition thing almost sounds like a refrain in a song, so it's usually set aside as poetry now in the more modern translations. The RSV was, I think, 53, so didn't do that. It just kept it as part of the text. But the general consensus of both conservative and liberal scholars is that this is a piece of poetry here. So it's usually set aside like that.
It's just a little confusing because in here it says he created man and woman, and yet we don't know that he created woman until the next chapter. And it doesn't
we do
say
here.
he created Adam. It doesn't say until the second chapter that he created Adam either.
There you go. Well, and it is actually telling us here that he creates there, but actually the ones that have it as him, them are closer to the original. So they're making it the inclusive. What they're doing. Remember, all translations have to balance translating the idea versus translating the actual words. What's a reason you would put them instead of him, them in the modern world?
Because feminists.
Because of feminism. Because some people are trained to hear, if they're talking about men, they're not talking about me. And man no longer means humanity. It only refers to half of humanity. And maybe not even that now with the whole intersectionality and all that stuff.
I didn't hear what she said.
Because of feminism.
Okay.
So they choose to translate it that way so that someone doesn't shut off their brain in the middle of hearing that and go, oh, this doesn't refer to me.
Right, so it's all inclusive now.
So to make it inclusive, right. But The important, the him, them is singular, plural. Okay? Go back to 26. How does it work with God? God says, it actually works in reverse. Let us make man after our likeness. Let them have dominion over fish, seas, over livestock, and all that. And then God created, so it actually goes plural, plural, singular. God goes plural, plural, singular. Humanity goes singular, singular, plural. Are you seeing it or no? God image. And then it goes on to God created, so then God's singular again. Humanity, it goes, God made man in his image, singular. In the image of God, he created him, singular. Male and female, he created them, plural. So what does that tell you about both God and humanity? We have this sort of vacillation between singular and plural. See this back and forth between singular and plural.
I'm sorry, Pastor.
No, that's fine.
I envisioned when you read it, right, and I'm just listening to you, not reading it.
Uh-huh.
Instead of a straight line with arrows, mine was a circle, going from and returning to.
I like that.
You know, we come from God, we return to, so it's a complete circle. I don't know, that's what came in my mind.
No, I think that's great. That's wonderful. Singular and plural. Yeah, that's this balance, right? Absolutely. So, first of all, we find it in God. And then we find it in humanity. Let's start with humanity because we're more familiar with humanity than God. Who's the singular in humanity? In your experience, who's singular? Who's the singular? You! Right! Right. Now, who's the plural? Everyone else. But who are the most intimate people around you?
Your family?
Your family, right. Those are the people who have the most impact on your personality. When you go to sit on a therapist's couch, you usually talk about your family, not about the world in general, because they have far more impact on you. Right. But there's always this balance between singular and plural, right? What happens if a child is raised without proper socialization? More than different. We've had unfortunate cases of abuse where a kid is born and essentially just fed, but not allowed to interact with people. They don't develop a lot of basic human capacities. They don't develop language. They don't develop, and by not having language, they don't have the ability to think. Without connection to other people, we don't become individuals. Without individuals, we have no plural. So there's this constant balance in human experience between what it means, between the rights of the group and the rights of the individual. Right? And you see this back and forth throughout history. It's always this thing. But what's another word for everyone else? Or some other words, huh? Them. Others, yeah. I guess I was kind of thinking in my mind something like individuals versus communities, right? I'm just trying to come up with differentiations. Individual communities or community in general. Name one of my son's favorite television shows. You have this back and forth. Without the community, you can't get individuals. Human beings never develop any of our capacities. Without individuals, there's no one to make up the community. So you have this constant back and forth. So humans are made to be individuals in community. If you cut off the community from us, we cease to be individuals very well. In fact, does anybody know what the word idiot means? The word idiot means alone. An idiot is a person who's alone. If you're alone in the world. Conversely, the community doesn't work without all the individuals participating in it. So we're made to be individuals in community, and those two things are inextricable. This is what it means to be a human being. You never escape community and its bonds, and the community never escapes individuals and their demands. Tell us about God from our own experience.
He's unique.
He's unique, that's right. But what else?
Does he need us?
That's a good question. Let's come back to it. I've heard pastors preach sermons like that. God created the world because he was lonely and wanted someone to share it with.
We're never alone.
Huh?
So you have Jesus and the Spirit.
That's what you said. What'd you say?
I said we're never alone.
We're never alone. That's right. Human beings are never alone. Absolutely.
And I wasn't necessarily thinking God was lonely. I was just thinking more like, I don't know what I was thinking, but just that he relied on us on some extent, not to satisfy, like, him being alone or him having an ego, just loving us and needing us and wanting us and relying on
Certainly he
us,
seems to want us.
right?
Yeah, he absolutely
Not
wants
in a
us.
negative way, but in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why create us if he didn't want us?
Right.
I mean, you have that option. If you're God, you have the option to not create, right? I mean, there are certain types of food I never make in my kitchen because I don't like them. Left to my own devices, we'll never eat lima beans again in my house. Okay? I know, but I hate them. I'm sorry, I do. We'll come back to what we eat in a minute. A parallelism here. God, let in our image, then he creates. God is individual and community. Or rather, I think a better word than individual, because that has a lot of political freight nowadays, is person. Person and community. Same thing with God.
God doesn't have a community.
Doesn't he?
He's three persons in one.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Elizabeth?
He's three persons in one.
Okay.
That doesn't come out until Christianity, until you get the full revelation of God the Father, Son, and Holy
Is that
Spirit.
his community?
Huh?
Is that the Trinity is his
The Trinity is community.
Okay.
3 persons in a single
okay.
Godhead. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are the persons. And that's literally the word. In the Nicene Creed, translated as I believe in. The word is hypostasis in Greek, which means person. The community, or the... What does community mean? Those of you who have Latin scholars. What's the prefix CO mean?
To be aware.
With. Excellent. And then what's unity mean? One. One with each other. So the community is one God, 3 persons, eternally. There's no time when the Son gets created. There's no time when the Spirit gets created. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are eternal, but they're one God. They are individuals or persons in community, and that's how we are too. Cut off one side of that equation, and we truncate our humanity. We stop being the people we were meant to be. God is not fully God. If you're a Muslim, you only believe in this word, unity. There's only one God. There's no community in God. There's no with in God. And as Christians, the fullness of what John means when he says God is love in his letter is you can't have love without something to love. He doesn't mean God's a feeling about love. God has always had someone to love. The Father loves the Son, who loves the Spirit, who loves the Father. And it goes around in that circle, like you just said. That was beautiful, Anne. Yeah. Go ahead.
A person develops his personality by the community.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine Jesus or the Spirit arguing with God. So he can't.
There's no arguing. There's no arguing because in God there's peace. In human community there's no peace. And that starts with I want the cookie and Mom won't give it to me. Right? God, you're right. There's that is lacking. What there is relationship that defines them over and against one another. You have the 3 persons of God. There's no conflict though within God. But that part's different from what we experience. And we experience it differently because of what happens in chapter 3, which we're going to get to. But let's wrap up chapter 1 here before we're out of time. God blessed them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. There's a little difference, right? Before it was always it was good. Now we have it's very good. So this is the capstone. We're at the end. This is kind of like the ta-da.
But then he changes it.
What does he change?
Well, he says, you have dominion over everything. And then he says, you can't eat of this tree.
That's right. He does place some limitations there. But we haven't gotten to that part of the story yet.
Well, I understand, but
Also, we're meant to be like God, not to be God.
Right. But what's distinctively missing here? What did he give human beings for food? All of you. What did he give human beings for food? What did he give the animals for
fruit and vegetables.
What's missing? Meat. Yep, there's no meat eating this at this stage of humanity. My son is in pain. What's that?
Does that mean we should be vegans then?
But then why would he, I just always wonder if it doesn't say
No,
anything
because
about,
Jesus gave the people fish later on.
if there, right, but if there isn't anything about eating meat, why are there cows and why are there pigs? With
good-
He
meat.
created livestock.
Yeah, you're right. That seems to be a distinction that it is related to what you eat or what else do you do with them.
You
Be
use
friends
them
with
for
them.
clothing.
Well,
Nope. Or more important than clothing, sacrifice, use them for worship. So it just seems that at this stage of the story, Gerald, the question is not whether we should be vegans today. It seems at this stage of the story they were created, if not to be vegans, at least vegetarians. Maybe they were allowed to have milk, because that doesn't kill the animal. But they weren't created to eat animals, and the animals weren't created to eat each other. That's why later, when the prophet Isaiah gives the prophecy we call the peaceable kingdom, he says the lion will lie down with the lamb, because the lamb doesn't have anything to be afraid of anymore. It's just like it was in the beginning. Lions don't eat lambs in God's perfect kingdom. Now, Adam and Eve are about to wreck it in chapter 3. But in the perfect kingdom, it's not like that. Creatures don't need to kill each other to eat. In the original perfection of God's plan. And that's why the Revelation chapter 22 is written the way it is too. Because it's not just human beings that have no pain to deal with. And how does the chapter end? It ends with that evening and morning, the sixth day. But that's not really where the story ends. So I'm going to read to you the first 3 verses of chapter 2.
But what about the last line? Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array.
That's chapter 2 in my Bible.
Oh, it actually is just separated from it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it is separated.
Yeah, because that's where the monk who put the chapter marks in put chapter 2. But listen to this. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them, and on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Now, does that sound like a separate story, or does it sound like the end of the story we've been reading?
Sounds like the end of
Right, yeah, because it talks about the seventh day, right? And thus God created the heaven and the earth. It's like the wrap-up, right? Just like we did at the beginning of this class, let's look back at what's been happening. So actually, this is the end of this first story. It's the account of the 7 days ends with the first 3 chapters of first 3 verses, of chapter 2. It doesn't end with the end of chapter 1.
Why isn't it in chapter 1?
I have no idea what the monk did it the way he did. It doesn't make any sense.
Like a cliffhanger thing, like to be continued.
To be continued, yes. When you get to chapter 2, we'll tell you how it ends. Yep. So anything grab you about this? Anything grab you about this wrap up here? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's like
Is the Sabbath then meant to be a day of rest or a day of praising God for what he has done?
Well, it seems that praise is not meant to be work for us. It's both. It's meant to be, God puts it apart and makes it holy. That's actually what the word holy means. The word is kadash in Hebrew, the word holy. And it literally means set aside. Put aside to be special. You know? A lot of houses, maybe some of your parents have the special china they only get out on holidays, the special plates, right? That's what it means. To be holy literally means to be set aside and special. But what's really interesting about this is that on the seventh day, God finished his work from all he had done. He rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. So, of course, that makes it distinct, right? There's no work going on. Now, God's resting. Do you think God's resting because he's tired? Sorry, that's the doorbell. Yeah, is God resting because he's tired? No, God's not tired. So why is he resting? Why would you stop working?
I think he feels like he's done. He's completed.
Yeah. This is I signed the picture. Oh, look at that. In fact, he signed the picture how? How did God put his name into the picture?
People.
Yes, they're in his image. He literally puts his signature on the picture and stands back. It's done. Look at that. Yeah, exactly. And there's a beautiful way you can see this is if you ever go down to Gettysburg, you go into what's called the cyclorama. There's a painting that's in the round. Where do you sign? If you normally sign a painting in the lower right-hand corner, right? So there's no corner. Where do you sign your painting? If you painted something at 360 degrees, you don't. You paint yourself into the picture. And that's exactly what the artist did. They'll show you during the show which of the characters in there was never on the battlefield because it's actually a portrait of the artist. He painted himself into the picture. So that's exactly what God does in this story.
I've been down to Gettysburg many times and I've never seen that.
We'll have to take you in for the tour then.
That would be good.
Very interesting.
Yep. So God rests from all he has done. He sets aside this day. What's interesting though, do you remember back already in the creation story, we were told that something was set in the heavens to organize our days and our seasons, right? The stars and the moons and all that. That's to organize time. Now we've got something very different. How is the week going to be organized? By the Spirit. Go ahead.
The days of creation.
Yeah, by God's activity. What's really interesting about that, for those of you having to make distinctions between the Enuma Elish and the Genesis account and stuff like this, the only people who celebrated weeks in the ancient world were Jews. Seasons, yes. Weeks, no. There were no smaller subdivisions. Only Jews did that, and only because of this story. There is no parallel in any other creation account to, at the end of the creation, the God rests, and then gives an institution to humanity to remember the story of the creation. Not once a year at the summer solstice, but every week. You're going to remember every week what God has done because you're going to imitate God. And remember, that's going to remind you you're supposed to imitate God, right? That's the likeness piece. You're going to remember that because every week you're going to rest just like God rested. So that makes it very unique among ancient creation stories. All right.